Tickle the pages! Yay!
Once upon a time, in a land called Canaan, there lived a young boy called Joseph. He had 11 brothers, but he was by far the favorite son of his father, Jacob, who had even given him a special coat of many colors. The fact that he was his father's favorite made his brothers jealous, and they were not very nice to him. Story of Joseph for kids. Joseph and his coat of many colors. Joseph had also been given a special gift by God. He was able to interpret dreams. This meant that he could understand the messages which the dreams held. One day, Joseph had a dream that he was in a field with his brothers. Each of them were gathering bundles of wheat. Joseph's bundle of wheat stood tall and strong, while his brothers' bundles all bowed down to his. Story of Joseph for kids. Joseph's dreams. When he told his brothers about his dream, they were not at all happy to hear this. One day, after Joseph had a second dream, his brothers decided to get rid of him. They threw him into a deep, dark pit and planned to leave him there. However, as Joseph sat in the pit, his brothers saw some traders passing by and decided to sell Joseph to them as a slave. These traders took Joseph far away from his home. He was now all alone and very scared. Story of Joseph for kids. Joseph gets thrown in the pit. The traders took Joseph to Egypt, where they sold him to a man named Potiphar. Even though he was a slave, Joseph worked hard and did everything to the best of his ability. God was with Joseph and blessed everything he did. Potiphar noticed how well Joseph was doing and made him head of the household. However, Joseph was just about to face another difficult situation. Potiphar's wife falsely accused Joseph of something he didn't do, which made Potiphar very angry. Even though Joseph was telling the truth, Potiphar believed his wife and had Joseph thrown in prison. Story of Joseph for kids. Joseph in Egypt. God looked after Joseph while he was in prison, so he didn't lose hope, and even continued to use his gift for interpreting dreams to help the other prisoners. One day, two of Pharaoh's servants, the cupbearer and the baker, were thrown into the same prison as Joseph. They both had troubling dreams, and Joseph was able to explain their meanings to them. The cupbearer's dream meant that he would be restored to his position in 3 days. Unfortunately, the baker's dream meant that he would be hanged in 3 days. Joseph's interpretations came true, and he asked the cupbearer to remember him to the Pharaoh. But the cupbearer forgot all about Joseph for a long time. Story of Joseph for kids. The cupbearer and the baker's dreams. One day, more than 2 years later, Pharaoh had very puzzling dreams himself, which none of his wise men could interpret. Suddenly, the cupbearer remembered Joseph and told Pharaoh about him. Joseph was immediately called to the palace to interpret the Pharaoh's dream. He explained to Pharaoh the dreams meant there would be 7 years of plenty in the kingdom, followed by 7 years of famine. Joseph advised the king to save up food during the good years, so that they would then have enough food to eat during the bad years. Story of Joseph for kids. Pharaoh. Pharaoh was extremely impressed with Joseph, so much so that he made him the second most powerful person in all of Egypt. Thanks to Joseph and his God-given gift for interpreting dreams, many people throughout the kingdom were saved from starvation. During the severe famine that followed, Joseph's brothers came to Egypt seeking food. They didn't recognize Joseph, but Joseph knew who they were, and he forgave them for what they had done to him. Story of Joseph for kids. Pharaoh listens to Joseph. Joseph's family then moved to Egypt, and Joseph himself became a great leader. His story shows us the importance of forgiveness, trusting in God, and using our own talents to help others. tirelessly, following God's precise instructions. 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, 3 stories high, all made the tallest mountains were covered. Inside the ark, Noah, his wife, his 3 sons, and their wives, along with thousands of animals, floated safely above the floodwaters for months. Can you imagine being on that boat? The sounds of all those animals, the responsibility of keeping craziest sounding instructions might just be part of a bigger plan, and that faith, patience, and perseverance can carry us through even the most impossible seeming situations. Let me tell you one of the most profound stories from the Bible. The tale of 2 brothers, Cain and Abel. It's a story that still resonates today, touching on themes of jealousy, anger, and the consequences of our choices. Adam and Eve had 2 sons. The firstborn was Cain, who became a farmer, tilling the soil and growing crops. His younger brother Abel became a shepherd, tending to his flocks with care and dedication. Both brothers lived simple lives, working with their hands and offering their best to God. One day, both brothers decided to bring offerings to the Lord. Cain brought some of his crops from the ground, while Abel brought the firstborn from his flock, selecting the finest portions. Now, here's where things get interesting. God looked with favor on Abel's offering, but not on Cain's. You might wonder why. Well, it wasn't about what they offered, but rather the heart behind the offering. Abel gave his best, with sincere devotion, while Cain, well, he just gave what he had to give. Without much thought or genuine care, Cain became furious. His face fell, and bitter jealousy took root in his heart. God saw this and actually spoke to Cain, warning him about the dangerous path his anger was leading him down. "Why are you angry?" God asked. "If you do what is right, won't you be accepted?" But Cain didn't listen. Instead, he invited his brother out to the field one day, and there, in a moment that would echo through history, Cain killed Abel. It was the first murder in human history, born from the poisonous mix of jealousy and unchecked anger. When God asked Cain where his brother was, he uttered those famous words, "Am I my brother's keeper?" But God knew, and as a consequence, Cain was cursed to be a restless wanderer on the earth, marked so that no one would kill him, but forced to live with the weight of what he had done. This story isn't just an ancient tale. It's a mirror that reflects some of our deepest human struggles. It shows us how destructive jealousy can be, how important it is to manage our emotions, and how our choices can have lasting consequences. Every time we feel that spark of jealousy or that flame of anger, we have a choice. Will we be like Cain, or will we choose a better path? Think about that the next time you feel envious of someone else's success or recognition. Remember Cain and Abel, and choose wisely. Once upon a time, there was a shepherd boy named David, who lived in Israel and took care of his family's sheep. One day, his father Jesse told David to take some food to his brothers, who were serving as soldiers in the army of Israel in the fight against the Philistines. When David arrived at the camp, he could hear one of the Philistine soldiers shouting insults at the Israelites. His name was Goliath, and he was a giant of a man. He challenged the army of Israel to send a soldier to fight him. All the soldiers were terrified of Goliath, but young David was not afraid. The shepherd boy was in fact very brave, and he wanted to help his people. He asked permission from King Saul if he could go onto the battlefield and fight the giant himself. King Saul eventually allowed David to fight Goliath, but he worried for his safety. This is because David refused the armor and weapons that the king had offered him. Instead, he preferred to fight Goliath with only a sling and 5 smooth stones. When Goliath saw David approach him without spear or shield, he laughed at the boy and threatened to feed him to the birds. David replied that he didn't need such weapons, as he came to defeat the Philistine in the name of God. Using his sling, David hurled a stone at Goliath's forehead. The giant fell to the ground, dead. Once they saw that their champion had been killed, the Philistines became scared and fled, while the Israelites chased them across the battlefield. David soon became famous throughout Israel and was considered to be a hero. The shepherd boy was loved by all the Israelites, as he had saved them from the Philistines. One day, they made him king. The story of David and Goliath is important because it shows us that we are all able to overcome the biggest challenges in life if we have faith in ourselves and God.